as a good practice to perhaps inspire us and motivate us as to what could be achieved for Herefordshire. So it's my pleasure to hand over to John now.
Amanda, thank you very much for those kind words. I was just thinking on the train coming up here from London. It's about 20 years ago that I was last here, and I was last in this hall. And that was around about the time when the previous bypass through the magical Lag Meadows had been defeated. And I was invited here by Paige Mitchell, who's in the audience here tonight. And I think it was celebration time for the local campaigners there. In fact, I think, certainly at the time, the Hereford bypass, as it was known, was the only national scheme to be defeated at a public inquiry. Lots of other road schemes over the years have been stopped by other methods, either before public inquiries or afterwards. But then, and I think it's still true now, the Hereford bypass became famous nationally as the only scheme that was stopped at a public inquiry, and all credit to the campaigners who were involved in that public inquiry. So it's déjà vu in many ways, but I think it's also déjà vu in the sense that 20 years on, you're still facing the prospect of a bypass. It may be a different bypass in a different location, but the question I ask myself, and I'll come back to talk about in a minute, is why are we facing a bypass 20 years on? What has been done in that time to deal with the traffic in Hereford? Now, Campaign for Better Transport is not against road building per se. We understand in certain circumstances it may be necessary and even desirable. For example, if a new housing estate is built or a new business park, you do need a road to have access to it. But our view now, and it mirrors the view coming from the Department for Transport, is that when you're faced with a traffic and transport problem at any level, national, regional or local, the Department for Transport is saying that road building plan must be the solution of last resort. Everything else ought to be tried first. And it's only if it's very clear that other solutions are not tenable that road building should be looked at. And I think it's one of the reasons why the Department for Transport has so far been reluctant to give money to the proposed road building schemes around Hereford, because they are not convinced that this is a plan of the last resort. And one of the reasons for that is this figure. As 20 years ago, the vast majority of traffic in Hereford is not through traffic. I think the figure may be around 83% of the traffic is not through traffic. So if you are building a bypass, and I know that the Southern Link Road is only part of it, but if you're building a full-scale bypass, it's essentially there to deal with through traffic. Yet if the problem is not through traffic in a city, the bypass is somewhat irrelevant, because it's dealing with a problem that's not there. More than that, what I think would happen if the bypass was built, it might well, and certainly in the short term, remove some of the traffic from Hereford. But what it would do in the long term, because it would free up space in Hereford for more local traffic to use the roads, in 20 years' time, we're going to be back to the same problems with traffic congestion, even with the bypass, that the city's got today without the bypass. Because one of the lessons we learnt in the 1990s, and all the academic literature from across Europe points in this direction, that if in advanced economies like the UK, you build a new road, what it does is initially relieves traffic on the existing roads, but because there is a hidden demand for car travel, it frees up space for people who previously would not have used their cars to do so, and thus over a period of time all the roads become congested. So I would argue that the bypass, because the amount of through traffic at Hereford is relatively small, is not the answer to the problem. More than that, it's going to be a very expensive road that in the end of the day will probably result in Hereford having as much traffic problems in 20 years' time as it has today. I believe that we need to look forward and look for a different sort of solution which is viable. A month ago or so, I was asked to go to speak at a noise conference. I know a noise conference doesn't sound very exciting, but anyway, it was in the Netherlands, so there was a bit of excitement there. I was asked to go and speak at a noise conference in Maastricht, which, as you know, is a small town, a relatively small town, in the southern part of the Netherlands. I went by train, I left traffic-filled London, I went through traffic-filled Brussels, and then I got off the local train in Maastricht, and suddenly I was in a different world. There were grandparents cycling safely with their grandchildren. There was a bus waiting for me outside the train station, a regular bus that could take me back to my hotel. Maastricht didn't ban cars, but it put cars in their place. Because what it did was adopt a strategy over many years of developing viable alternatives to car travel. In each case, safe cycle lanes, encouragement of walking, a network of bus services that were relatively cheap and frequent. And as a result, it hasn't got traffic problems. It's got very few cars in the city. Now, I looked before I came here at the population of Maastricht and compared that with the population of Hereford. Maastricht is about 100,000 people, just over. I think Hereford is just over, the city itself is just over 50,000 people. It seems to me that if a city of 100,000 people, where potentially there would be more car traffic than in a city of 50,000 people, can develop a successful strategy based on cycling, walking, and bus use, so could Hereford. And Maastricht's economy has not suffered in any way. In fact, it's a hugely successful town. The Dutch people at the conference said to me, whispered to me, you know, Maastricht is not really Dutch. I said, it feels very Dutch to me. Oh no, they said, Belgium is just across the river, and Maastricht is closer to Brussels than it is to Cologne. Now I say this because Maastricht has got through traffic in a way that Hereford never will have. Maastricht's on an historic route from Germany through to Amsterdam. And yet it can, even with a high level of through traffic, develop a plan that is based on sustainable transport. It does have one rather ugly motorway going through the middle. But what it's doing with that motorway, and this is one reason why the noise conference was held in Maastricht, was it's tunnelling over the motorway right through the centre. And it will be putting grass over the tunnel so that it becomes, what is a nasty motorway, becomes a nice park. Hereford doesn't need to do that, I don't think, because you haven't got anything like the level of through traffic that Maastricht, right in that sort of centre of Europe, has. So, a challenge for the Council is to think in a different sort of way. But I think it's an exciting challenge. It's a forward-thinking challenge. The prize could be great. The prize could be a quality of life in Hereford that the car-dominated streets don't allow today. The prize could be children walking and cycling to school in safety. Just a stat really, which some of you will know, is that in the UK as a whole, and Hereford is probably not very different, half of all journeys made are under 2 miles long. Really, if the buses and the bikes are there, they don't need to be done by car. So I suggest that there is an alternative vision to the bypass. The alternative vision is based on an exciting, sustainable future, which is not just a green solution, it is that, but it is a solution that works for people, that could work as worked for the people of Maastricht and could work for the people of Hereford, giving everybody here a quality of life free from a car-dominated city that we don't have today. I know some work has been done on cycling and particularly the people who've been doing work on space for cycling in Hereford. That has been recognised actually across the UK. But I understand the Council's plan is only for cycling to increase by about 1% over the next several years. It could be much more. But it needs that exciting, sustainable strategy. And just one last point. It's often said, and it's said very correctly, that those who are running a city, councillors and council officers, do have to have as possibly their prime concern the economic well-being of the city and of the people in the city. And I think that's right. It would be absolutely no good at all if you had walking, cycling and buses, but the economy was sinking. But the great story from Maastricht is a similar story for places like York, is that a sustainable economy, not banning the cars, but emphasizing other ways of getting around, not only improves the quality of life, but improves the performance of the economy. Let me come back to my Dutch friend again, who was saying, Maastricht's not really a Dutch town. You know what he said? It's got all those smart clothes shops like the French do. It's a bit like Paris. Now, I thought that's really rather nice. I think he was sort of saying it's not terribly Dutch, they're a bit smart for us. But the reason I'm telling you the story is that if you walked out at this station in Maastricht, and it happens in other towns across Europe as well, I'm just using Maastricht because I think it's similar to Hereford. There's a thriving economy. There's smart shops that you can see in the Champs-Élysées in Paris. Sustainable transport has not damaged the economy. If anything, it's enhanced the economy. So I love coming to Hereford, but I don't think I want to come back in 10 years' time and hear that I'm another bypass, either to the west or to the east, or perish the thought both, is proposed. But I would like to come back next time to Hereford, is get off the train and have a bike there. We won't call them Boris bikes, we call them Boris bikes in London, but you know. Have a bike there, have a bus, maybe even a small tram system. That's the Hereford I'd like to come and see in 10 years' time. I think the exciting challenge for councillors and decision makers in Hereford is to make that happen. It'll be good for the quality of life of people in the town, and I'm convinced it'll be great for the economy as well. Thanks very much.